CBC News has confirmed that the federal government is discussing trade concessions with Washington in return for some tariff relief. Sources tell us that Ottawa is preparing to meet some U.S. trade demands, including potentially ending bans on American alcohol sales. A spokesperson for the Canada-U.S. trade minister says Dominic LeBlanc, the minister, is leaving Washington today after a visit this week, and they told CBC that Canada's chief trade negotiator, Janice Charette, will remain in the U.S. capital over the weekend. So we do want to stay on this breaking news story for you. And for that, we're going to bring in Dennis Darby. He is the president of Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters and also a member of the Advisory Committee on Canada-U.S. Economic Relations. Thank you so much for making time for us today.
Good afternoon, Darcy.
Okay, so we're talking about the potential here for making concessions in order to get some tariff relief ahead of August 19th. Is this the best approach at this point?
Well, first of all, let me start that Canada and the U.S. are talking and having substantial talks with respect to coming to an agreement is very positive. You have to, from that point of view alone, because up till now, it has been, it has not been as intense. And as you mentioned, we know the trade negotiator and her team are in Washington. So that's good. Manufacturers need certainty, and of course, they're the ones mostly affected by the impending tariffs, but also by the tariffs that do exist under Section 232.
So in terms of reaction so far from those within the circles that you speak to when we're talking about manufacturing, what have they had to say about this potential solution of offering concessions, which could mean taking off some retaliatory tariffs too, in order to alleviate that tariff pressure?
Well, first of all, I don't know the details about what Canada has offered at the table. What I do know is that the trade negotiator and the minister have let us know that they are talking about those 338 tariffs you mentioned, the ones that are impending and which the U.S. has threatened to put in place on the 19th, which are very, very hurtful to manufacturing. And they're also talking about relief on the 232 tariffs, which have affected steel, aluminum, wood, and automotive. So the fact that they're talking about both of those is very, very positive. What they are offering in return, we're not party to what they are offering in return, but we do know that the U.S. has been very public. The president is very public that things related to alcohol sales, counter tariffs, and dairy quota are the things that they want. But really what's important is that we are actually getting towards some kind of an agreement. I expect that we will learn more as the two parties negotiate, but of course you don't tend to negotiate in public, so what's being spoken of at the table exactly, we don't know, but it is encouraging. Most of what Canada manufactures goes to the U.S. and becomes part of Made in America products. So it's really important for Canada and the U.S. to have some kind of certainty, because that uncertainty we've had is actually the biggest challenge we've seen in the sector and by members of manufacturing in both Canada and the U.S. So the fact that they're actually having substantial talks towards some kind of outcome is a good thing.
When we talk about potential concessions, part of what is being reported now, and sources have confirmed this to CBC's Katie Simpson and to CBC News, talking about these potential concessions. In some cases, that could mean putting the American alcohol, back on the shelves in some provinces that have continued to pull that off the shelves. And that has, of course, really had some U.S. officials sit up and take notice as well. But also we know that supply management, that was something that our Katie Simpson really emphasized. That is something that has been emphasized as something that cannot be touched, but we know it is a major irritant for the American side. What do you feel would be worth it in terms of concessions for what we're getting? Because the reporting suggests that the U.S. says, hey, you know what, there's going to be those sectoral tariffs, but maybe the rate could change. So what do you think is worth it for us to give up to get something?
Well, I think at the end, first of all, certainty. The most important thing right now for our sector is having a certainty in terms of our trading relationship with the U.S. What are the rules? Are the rules going to be durable? And most importantly, and I can't overemphasize this, those impending tariffs under Section 338 would be devastating to manufacturers, especially in Ontario and Quebec and in BC. So getting those off the table, having those not implemented. So I think certainty, getting rid of those tariffs, how the government decides to negotiate what it wants to give back and forth is probably their decision. But from a point of view of manufacturers, it's getting that certainty and certainly not having those new tariffs imposed. getting rid of those Section 232 tariffs would be the absolute goal. Where the government has to go, they're going to figure that out. But right now, we've been living in a lot of uncertainty and a lot of threats of new tariffs. If we can get out from under those, it will help manufacturing in Canada in particular, but certainly right across North America.
You know, when we're talking too about potential concessions, I wanted to ask you about the trust factor. Most certainly that is something that I would imagine is coming up in those conversations that you have with other people who might be on this committee as well, on this advisory committee. Is there sort of this potential for a trust issue? Because there has been in the past cases where Canada has made concessions, where we're talking about the digital services tax and other issues where there's concessions that have been made and then nothing has happened in return.
So I think now that they're having those substantial discussions, looking at all phases, both those two different sets of tariffs, plus also a discussion about a long-term agreement, whether it's under CUSMA or outside of CUSMA. I think that's absolutely correct. I think right now is the time to get what Canada needs, and then but not bargain anything else before that. So I think the discussions are going to be in the room. I know everybody wants to speculate, but they'll be in the room. I'm optimistic, as I know a lot of my counterparts are, that we're in the process we've wanted to be in for months, to have an actual substantial discussion about what each side is willing to give and take. And that's all I can. That's about as far as I'd be willing to speculate at this point. I think this is a better position than we've been in for some months, and I'm hopeful that the negotiators will do a great job and get us to something that allows. It really comes down to certainty, so that we have access to their market, and that we have some level of predictability. And you're absolutely right. Getting a review or getting a revised CUSMA, which has a lot of other things other than these tariffs, which provides that long-term certainty, would be our preference. I think it's all of our preference. And as I understand, the U.S. is willing to talk about that as well. So, like I said, this is the beginning of probably the toughest part of the negotiation, if I was to speculate.
Well, Mr. Darby, I have so many more questions for you, and I have unfortunately run out of time, though, for this conversation. But thank you so much for joining us and for your insights on this breaking news story. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
That is Dennis Darby. He is the president of Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters and also a member of the Advisory Committee on Canada-U.S. Economic Relations. Thanks again.